Aung La, what about you? Tell me about your faith. Was it something that you had growing
Yeah.
up with your parents,
Could,
or
could I ask you a question? Why do you call yourself like the podcast like white belt?
Sure? So spiritually, I always want to have the mentality of a white belt. I don't know everything, and whatever my views are, even today, that's subject to review. The Holy Spirit may fill me with some kind of a download in the future, and I'm sure He will, where I was wrong about something. So maybe my interpretation or something. So I always want to have like a white belt mentality, like I'm just here to learn,
Ready to learn. Yeah, I
ready to
think that's
learn.
great.
Yeah,
Have you read the whole Bible?
I have, but really, what I concentrate on is I concentrate on the Gospels. What Jesus said. This is what I count: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and
I'm
then
with you.
Brother James, who's the brother of Jesus. Um, I look at myself like a follower of Jesus Christ. This is how I see it. What about you?
So I grew up a Seventh-Day Adventist. Yeah, so I grew up as a Seventh-Day Adventist, and if you know the Seventh-Day Adventists, they believe that they are the remnant church. They're the rightful church. They're the only church that's correct. Every church, every other church has the mark of the beast because they go to church on Sunday. So every other Christians are going to hell because they have the mark of the beast because they go to church on Sunday because they don't worship on the seventh day. Right? And I grew up believing that. We are the remnant church. You don't keep the Sabbath, you are sinning. You are sinning. And then when and obviously I would go to church on Saturdays, right? I would sit in the pews and I would listen and I would try to be the best Christian that I could be, and like unlike Dr. Dill, in my college years, like I fell, but
I felt plenty too.
yeah,
I'm not trying to say I never felt.
But growing up, I'm going to be a virgin till I get married. All these things like up until like 20s, like I was like going to do that because like there's we follow the Bible to a T pretty much. Can't eat pork, can't eat shrimp. Go to Sabbath keep the Sabbath holy because that's what it says in Genesis 2. God rested from His works, right? And made that day holy. So why are we not following this? And then I read the whole Bible and I understood, so when Nate was leading the Bible study, right? We also did a side thing where we read the whole Bible, right? We read the whole Bible from Genesis all the way through Revelations. And when we read the whole Bible, like I realized that the Seventh-Day Adventists were off, right? They were off. And I'm telling you this, like a lot of the Christian churches are still very off till today, right? They think that the Israel now is the same Israel. Those that bless Israel will be blessed, right? In Genesis, it says that those that bless like Israel will be blessed. Those that like hate on them will be hated. Curse will be cursed, right? But we also have to understand, like everything is about covenant. The covenant that God made with His chosen people, the Israelites, right? Were to bring on the Messiah, right? And then the covenant that we follower of Christ have is a new covenant. We are the spiritual children of God. We're not the physical children. We are the spiritual children of God. And when Jesus said, like, you have to be born again in the spirit and in water, right? Unless you're born again in the spirit and in water, you won't go to heaven, right? This is what He means. We are the spiritual children of God. So when I read the whole Bible, I understood that we are under a new covenant. We are under a new covenant, and we're called to do we're called to do bigger things than what, like, than sit in a church pew and think that you're the remnant church. So when I started reading the whole Bible, and I had to pray about it and over again to get understanding, to have the Holy Spirit speak to me, right? And if you read it as a man, like if you read it, the Holy Spirit will speak to you and explain to you things that you don't understand, because God gave us wisdom abundantly, right? Wisdom He gives us abundantly, and understanding He'll give us, right? But everything else is on us. Everything else is on us, and we have to act and walk that way, right? So that's where my life is right now. When I read the whole Bible, I was like, man, we were off. The church was off, and then I had like a better understanding about the covenants, a better understanding about what it means to be a follower of Christ.
So we tease in the Bible study, and Aung and I would alternate leading it. We say he's the Old Testament guy, and I'm like you. I love the Gospels because I go, hey, look, if you're God and you only have 3 years to explain what's important, you're probably going to highlight that when you send Jesus down to preach for 3 years. He's going to highlight what he thinks. It's like when you go to a lecture in a class, hopefully the teacher's going to tell you what he thinks is important, what's going to be on the test. And Jesus himself addresses, the Sabbath. He tells, the people who, if your ox falls in a pit, wouldn't go get it on the Sabbath. Or when they say, hey, your disciples were collecting wheat and eating it on the Sabbath, he talks about, being the bridegroom at the time of visitation. And also he says, what goes in your mouth, when he was talking about pork, what goes in your mouth doesn't defile you. It's what comes out, that does. So he and I talk about it a lot. And I think we're pretty similar
we are
in our belief, and I absolutely appreciate he has a better understanding for the Old Testament than I do. And a lot of times he's right. When you go back in the Old Testament, it all correlates and ties in. And I have gained a greater appreciation for the Old Testament by being with him. And he says, hey, look, in Isaiah, they talk about your side, your hands will be pierced, and, things like that. You'll be punctured. And, all the foreshadowing of the coming of Jesus. So it is kind of cool how it all ties in, but I'm with you. I go, man, the Gospels is what really do it for me.
Yeah. But the thing about the Old Testament, right? It teaches us things. Like you see all these things that happen in life in these days, and you're like, man, what is going on in the world today? The world is so sick and so weird. And I said, no, look at the Old Testament. What you hear with P. Diddy, what you hear with Epstein files, it's been done before. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at Noah's own son. Look at what Noah's own son did. Right? This is nothing. The P. Diddy and all that thing, this is like, it's been done before. That's why when I read the Old Testament, it gives me understanding. It gives me understanding of, wow, this makes sense. Like, this is nothing new on earth.